The power of not reacting. The roar of the city buzzed in his ears as Leo stood on the cracked sidewalk, the hot sun beating down on his brow. His stomach growled, an insistent reminder of the hunger gnawing at his insides, but he ignored it. He'd been ignoring the hunger for days now. His mother's voice echoed in his head, "You must learn to control your emotions, Leo. Your emotions are your chains, and the world will always pull them if you let it." He didn't fully understand what she meant by that, but he knew it was important. She had died when he was young, leaving him with nothing but the harsh streets of the city. But even in her absence, her words had stayed with him. Whenever he faced adversity, he clung to them. The world seemed cruel and indifferent to his pain, but Leo understood that if he didn't react, he could at least control himself. Today was another day he was determined to put that theory to the test. The kids in the alley were laughing at him, throwing scraps of paper at his face. They had done it before, and they would do it again. Leo clenched his fists, feeling the heat of anger rising in his chest. But instead of lashing out, he breathed deeply, remembering what his mother had told him. Control. Don't react. The boy in front of him, a bully named Marcus, grinned and threw another crumpled paper ball. Leo's hands trembled. He could feel the rage bubbling inside, threatening to spill over. The other kids jeered, urging Marcus on. Leo stood still, breathing through his nose. His mouth was dry, but he didn't show it. He didn't show anything. He simply stared at Marcus, his eyes steady. The longer he stood there, the angrier Marcus became. "What's wrong, poor boy? Cat got your tongue?" The insults kept coming, but Leo remained unflinching. The taunts didn't touch him. He had learned to drown them out, like a rock in a river that had long since stopped feeling the current. Finally, Marcus, frustrated by Leo's lack of response, shoved him hard. Leo stumbled back but did not fall. He caught himself and stood tall again, his heart pounding in his chest. The others were waiting for him to snap, to give them the satisfaction of a reaction, but Leo refused. The next few days passed in the same fashion. Leo walked the same streets, ignored the insults, and did his best to survive. He found small ways to earn money, running errands for local vendors, cleaning windows for a few coins. He lived a life of solitude, but it was a life where he was slowly learning how to master his emotions. He found that the less he reacted to the world around him, the more power he had. He began to feel like the world couldn't hurt him anymore, but the real test came on an otherwise ordinary day. Leo was walking through a crowded marketplace, his stomach growling in protest as he passed a vendor selling hot, steaming bread. The scent was overwhelming, and his hunger surged. His body ached with the need for food, but he couldn't afford it. Just as he was about to turn away, a hand grabbed his arm, pulling him roughly to the side. "Hey, you!" A voice barked. Leo spun around to see a tall man with a dirty suit and a cruel smirk. The man looked familiar, but Leo couldn't quite place him. "You owe me money," the man said, his eyes cold and calculating. "You've been avoiding me for weeks." Leo's heart skipped a beat. He had been careful. He knew that making the wrong move could cost him everything. I don't know what you're talking about." The man stepped closer, his breath foul. "Don't play dumb. I'm tired of your excuses. You owe me. And today, I want what's mine." Leo swallowed hard. He could feel the panic rising in his chest. His body screamed to fight, to flee, to do something, anything. But he fought it. He remembered his mother's words. "Your emotions are your chains," the man sneered, clearly not used to being ignored. He grabbed Leo by the collar, lifting him off the ground. Leo's head spun, but he kept his face impassive. His mind raced, searching for a way out, but he held on to one thought: don't react. A sudden commotion interrupted the confrontation. A police officer appeared, his stern eyes surveying the situation. Without a word, he pulled the man off Leo and shoved him aside. "Let him go," the officer said gruffly. The man hesitated, glaring at Leo before walking away with a final, hateful glance. Leo's legs wobbled, and he collapsed onto the nearby bench, his mind still spinning. His chest felt tight, and his hands shook, but the officer was already walking away, uninterested in anything but the next person who needed his attention. Leo stood up slowly, a new realization dawning on him. He hadn't just avoided a confrontation with that man. He had avoided a lifetime of fear. The key wasn't in letting things slide, it was in mastering himself so that nothing, no matter how big or small, could affect him. Days turned into weeks, and Leo's life seemed to follow a strange new rhythm. He still had his struggles, still faced hunger and hardships, but he found that the more he focused on not reacting to his circumstances, the more power he seemed to gain. It was as if the universe itself was taking note of his silent strength, his quiet resolve. But just when Leo thought he had everything figured out, he faced the greatest test of all. One night, while walking through a dark alley, a group of men appeared in front of him. They were armed with knives, their faces twisted with malice. Leo's heart skipped a beat, but instead of panicking, he stood still, breathing deeply, letting the fear wash over him without reacting to it. He had learned to control himself, but could he control the world around him? The men laughed at him. "What's this, huh? A boy without fear?" Without warning, one of them lunged at Leo. In that instant, everything changed. The twist: Leo didn't dodge. He didn't fight back. He simply let go. He closed his eyes and let himself become still. Truly still. And in that moment, a strange peace washed over him. The men hesitated. They stopped moving, as if the air had thickened around them, their limbs frozen. Suddenly, the world seemed to shift. The alley around them flickered like a mirage, and the men froze, unable to move. The power Leo had unknowingly cultivated, the power of non-reaction, had finally manifested. Not in the way he expected, but in a way that made the world itself bend to his will. The men stared at him, their knives trembling in their hands. They had no control, no desire to fight anymore. They dropped the weapons and walked away, leaving Leo standing there, untouched, his mind still clear and serene. The real power of not reacting wasn't about avoiding pain or conflict. It was about understanding that by not reacting, you control the situation, and in turn, you control your life. Leo had learned that the most powerful force in the world wasn't anger, fear, or even love, it was the complete mastery of yourself. The world could break him, but only if he let it, and Leo would never let that happen again.